Good morning, everyone. My name is Carolyn Hart Bennett, and today I'm going to read chapter 28 from the third leg of the journey of the Seven Sisters from my book, Seven Sisters, The Trek, chapter 28. After the near drowning incident, the shaken saints reunited with their wagons and continued to the camping area chosen by the scouts. When the wagons were all in a circle and the cattle were unyoked and driven downstream to drink and graze by the banks of the river, some of the Utah boys went to hunt prairie chickens, and some of the younger boys tied forks or knives to the end of sticks and went fishing. Eleanor and Aunt Lucy left the in-laws with their wagon mates. They figured it was their turn to wait on them hand and foot and listen to their discontent. At the camp of the Seven Sisters, Caroline was in a stew. She was in charge of making bread for the first supper on the plains and wasn't at all sure of her bread-making abilities. Then she remembered, Sister Schneider, could you give me some pointers on how to make bread so that it doesn't burn in these exasperating little bake kettles? Let me come to your camp, Sister Cleverly, and I'll show you. We can make a fire together, and I'll bake my bread alongside yours. Caroline was delighted with this new development. The best thing to do is get your fire started and burn it down a little bit while we make the dough. Gather around, sister, she ordered. You'll need to learn how to do this so you can all take your turns baking. Can we make 2 loaves so we don't have to bake anything tomorrow? At noon, hinted Caroline. We certainly can. They both went to work building the fire and mixing up the dough. After the fire burned for a few minutes, Sister Schneider continued to teach. Now, stir your coals around and make them even. Set the kettle down square. Make sure you have plenty of grease in the bottom of it. Put the dough in, add the lid, and put some coals on top. Then you must watch it carefully. You can't be starting on something else or you'll get sidetracked. You've got to keep your head on right side up, if you know what I mean. The sisters enjoyed being schooled by Sister Schneider and watched with great interest. After about 15 minutes, she announced, Let's take a peek at the bread. She lifted her lid with a hot pad, and there sat a beautifully rounded loaf of brown bread sizzling in bacon grease. The sisters leaned over the kettle and sniffed deeply. The smell is heavenly, said Lavinia. It's a work of art. Let's look at mine, suggested Caroline with hope in her heart. Lifting up her lid, she also found a nice brown loaf, but there was no sizzling. There was a darker color on the bottom and the faint smell of burnt crust. How come mine burned and yours is perfect, she said disappointedly. First of all, it looks like you didn't put in enough bacon grease. And secondly, I don't think you stirred your coals around evenly. But I did, she said as she started to dig around the bottom of her loaf with a knife to get it out. I guess it just wasn't enough. Don't get discouraged. You can always cut the bottom off. The top of the loaf looks perfectly edible. This cheered Caroline somewhat, and the sisters consoled her by eagerly biting into the section she cut off for each of them, but their expressions changed after the first swallow. Did you put any salt in this bread? Inquired Eleanor. Caroline was mortified. Oh, I knew I forgot something. Sister Schneider cackled. Don't fret, Caroline. Maybe you'll do better on your next loaf. By the by, girls, would you like some milk from my cow tomorrow morning? The sisters lit up. We didn't know you had a cow. Yes, I do, she assured him. I purchased Myrtle right just before we left Florence. The teamsters are herding her along the trail during the day, but I have to milk her morning and evening. I can't be without my favorite cooking ingredient, cream. The twins looked at each other and in unison exclaimed, We'd love some milk. After you have what you want to drink, you can put the rest in your butter churn each morning, she said. And by the time we stop rolling over these rocky roads for the day, there should be enough butter inside for your bread at night. Excuse me. The sisters laughed, hugged, and thanked Sister Schneider for her generosity. Then she gathered up her baking kettle and supplies and went back to her wagon. When she was out of sight, Lavinia looked at the others and laughed. She named her cow Myrtle. The others couldn't help but laugh, too. Then Aunt Lucy got a serious look on her face. Don't laugh, sisters. That's my grandmother's name. Oh, I'm sorry, Lucy, said Susanna, but it is kind of a funny name for a cow. Aunt Lucy broke her stern look and smiled. Don't tell anyone, but I always thought it was kind of a funny name for my grandmother. Just then Hurricane came walking toward the sisters' camp with a big smile on his face. Could you sisters use a prairie chicken for your supper? The sisters were overjoyed with this unexpected surprise, and all chorused, yes, as they contemplated how good a chicken would taste to them right now. Thank you so much. Caroline, too, was thrilled, but when Hurricane pulled the feathery little bird out from behind his back by its feet, she was dumbfounded. What do we do with that? Come along with me, Sister Cleverly. We'll go over by your wagon, and I'll show you how to skin and gut this little feller, so you can cook him up in your bake kettle. The rest of the sisters encouraged her to go with him. We'll keep the fire going, so when you get back, it will be ready. After the two left the circle, the remaining sisters were again visited. Hi-ho! Came the familiar voice of Sir Evelyn as he walked into their camp, leaning on his cane and holding an empty cup in his hand. And how are the 7 sisters doing this evening? Good. Fine, came a chorus of answers. Sir Evelyn, said Lavinia, beaming, how was your first day of trekking? It was definitely a whole lot of walking. My knee has swollen up again and hurts a little. I've talked to Captain Pinkerton about the possibility of riding a horse tomorrow to help herd the loose cattle at the back of the wagon train. I'm an excellent rider, actually, with many dressage championship titles back in England. What's a dressage championship? Asked Fanny. That's where you compete with other riders and show how your horse can prance and perform maneuvers that demonstrate flexibility, balance, and responsiveness to the rider. So you make your horse dance? Questioned Phoebe. Yes, it's much like that. It's very lovely to watch. My horses were strictly trained, and I've won many competitions in my shire and even won country title. The sisters were duly impressed. I would love to have seen that, Lavinia effervesced. Enough about me. How did you sisters do on your first day of trekking? He said, sitting down on a rock by their campfire. We did very well until the sisters-in-law nearly drowned, said Aunt Lucy. Then things turned a little sour. Yes, that really was something, wasn't it? He said. It scared me plenty, to tell you the truth. Eleanor felt the need to change the subject away from the in-laws and spoke up. We'd offer you some bread, Sir Evelyn, but Caroline seems to have burnt the bottom and forgotten to put in the salt, so it tastes pretty flat. That's all right. I don't need anything to eat, but I do crave a cup of tea. Do you happen to have any? I brought my cup. Mormons don't drink tea, said Phoebe bluntly. Or coffee, chimed in Fanny matter-of-factly. You two are joshing me, aren't you? He said in disbelief. Girls, admonished Susanna, you need to realize Sir Evelyn isn't a Mormon as of yet and doesn't have the same health rules we do. Sorry, they said together. And to add to your consternation, Sir Evelyn, said Eleanor half apologetically, I'm afraid we don't use tobacco or drink any kind of liquor either. Really? But those little vices make life so much more pleasurable, he reasoned. They help you socialize with other people. They make you feel good, and they help you relax and enjoy life a little bit more. Look around, Sir Evelyn, said Aunt Lucy. Do you think the saints who abstain from these things have any trouble socializing? Do you think they don't enjoy each other's company as they trek along and as they sing and dance in the evenings? He pondered that for a moment. No, I guess not. But how did your church settle on just those things to abstain from? The first prophet and founder of our church, Joseph Smith, received a revelation that hot drinks are not good for our bodies, said Eleanor. A revelation? He questioned. From whom? From Heavenly Father, said Lavinia. Heavenly Father talked to Joseph Smith and told him he wasn't to drink tea? Yes, he did. But tea is just a soothing hot beverage. How can there be anything wrong with drinking a soothing hot beverage? Aunt Lucy answered, We don't know why he singled out tea and coffee as hot drinks, but he must know something we don't know, because he said not to drink them. That is rather bewildering, he said, beginning to get agitated. Eleanor tried to give reasons. At first it was just given as a word of wisdom for the benefit of the church back in 1833, but it's been 30 years since then, and it has been accepted as a commandment by common consent of the body of the church. Now you have to be living the word of wisdom as it is called, to be baptized a member of our church. So you're saying there isn't any tea in the possession of anyone on this wagon train? You might find some, said Lavinia, but those who are strictly keeping the commandments of God won't have any. Well, I don't know if I can see myself becoming a teetotaler, he said, as he got up and limped off with his empty cup, not even saying goodbye. That was curious, said Eleanor. I thought he'd be more receptive to that teaching than he was. He certainly got all worked up over a simple cup of tea, said Lavinia, feeling a bit uneasy in her stomach. The spot where the saints were camping was in a very pretty setting, and the sun in the west was starting to create a beautiful sunset. There were sunflowers in abundance in the distance, and when Matthew and Otto ran past the sisters, spreading the word that they had found wild berries, this was the twins' cue to get permission to run with them. Come back before dark, twinsies, Susanna cautioned. We will, they chimed together. As Hurricane walked Caroline over to her wagon to teach her how to clean the prairie chicken, he was curious about her day. How did your driving go, Sister Cleverly? I think I did very well, she replied with pride. Buck and Doc minded me and only strayed to the side of the road a few times. Like I said, I think you're a natural, he said. She couldn't help smiling. When they got to the wagon, Hurricane pulled a large knife out of its sheath. You ain't squeamish, are you? He asked, studying her face. No, I don't think so. I want to learn how to do this so I can do it all by myself next time. All right, then. There are two ways to prepare a chicken for cooking. The first is to pluck all these little feathers off the bird, but that takes a long time and is pretty frustrating. The second way is to hang the chicken up by its feet and skin it. He took a piece of twine and hung it over a hook that was on the back gate of the wagon. Then he tied each end of it to each of the chicken's legs. Next, you cut around where the legs meet the feathers and then use your fingers to get hold of the skin. Let me do it, Caroline said with determination. Hurricane watched her as she gingerly touched the skin and got a good grip on it. Now, pull the skin down right off the chicken, he said. The skin came off quite easily, and she pulled until the feathers were inside out and she could go no further. Wait for a second. I need to make some more cuts, he said. She stopped, and he cut off the tail and wingtips. Then she continued pulling until the skin came down around its neck. Now I'll cut the head off, and you've got yourself a skinned chicken. Ew, I don't want to look, she said, shutting her eyes tightly. Then peeking through one squinting eye, she was amazed to see that he had already taken the head off, and there wasn't anything much else to look at. That is incredible. Can we cook it now? Not quite, sister. That was the easy part. Now comes the messy part. It looks like it's ready to cook to me. Well, the innards are still inside, and they don't cook up very well. Oh, I didn't think of that. I'm going to make a little cut right along the rib cage here. Then I want you to reach in as far as you can and pull out all the guts. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. Well, that's just plain sickening, and it doesn't smell very good either. Oh, my. She swallowed hard. You can do it, he encouraged. All right, I'm just going to do it, she said as she touched the innards. Ooh, they're still warm. She closed her eyes and gritted her teeth, plunged her hand inside, grabbed as much as she could, and pulled it out with force. That is revolting, she said as she threw the gooey mess on the ground and looked at her bloody hand. Hurricane watched closely to see if her color changed. He wanted to be sure to catch her if she fainted. To his surprise, she didn't hesitate to wait for instructions, but went back in and scraped and pulled and managed to bring out the rest of the slimy mess. I think I got it all. What do you think? Hurricane looked inside and was pleased that it looked so clean. Now we just need to rinse it out with some water, and it will be ready for cooking. I can do that, she said as she untied and ran off with the prairie chicken. Be back in a minute. Hurricane took the shovel from the back of the wagon and dug a hole a few feet away from the wagon. He scooped the guts from the ground into the hole and tossed some dirt over them so they wouldn't attract flies or animals. All the while, he chuckled, thinking about all the facial expressions Caroline made when she was cleaning her first prairie chicken. Even though Caroline had ruined the bread, she did a great job of cooking the little chicken, and her sisters devoured their portions and smacked their lips. They hadn't tasted anything that savory and good since leaving England. When the trumpeter summoned everyone to the center of the wagon circle for their nightly prayers, Captain Andrews was in charge. Brothers and sisters, what a wonderful day of trekking we had. You all did a splendid job, with the minor exception of the incident at the river crossing. The sisters-in-law turned beet red, and the rest of the company tried to suppress their annoyance with the two. Tomorrow you will start to feel the effects of walking you did today. You will feel a strain in some of your muscles, especially those in your hind quarters. The company chuckled, and some unconsciously rubbed their hips to massage the stiffness that was already setting in. Tomorrow we will try to go a little farther before we camp. Those of you who have blisters or sores on your feet, do not let them go untreated. Sister Wise and Sister Whittier have the medicine chest and can give you ointments and tincture. Be sure to wrap them securely with clean bandages for your trek tomorrow. Now, I don't want to alarm anybody, but I should mention that Captain Larkin shot a 4-year-old rattlesnake from his horse this morning, so watch where you step as you walk along. Phoebe gasped along with the others. How does he know it's 4 years old? He asked Sister Schneider, who was sitting next to her. It only has 4 rattles on its tail, she said. I've heard of rattlesnakes that have 8 rattles. That's a big snake, said Matthew, who was sitting on the other side of the twins. This talk sent a shudder through Phoebe. She wasn't so sure she wanted to run ahead the next day, if there was a possibility of scaring up a snake. The saints enjoyed being together and hearing instruction and encouragement from the captains. The night was beautiful, with the campfires glowing, and the saints singing a few of their favorite hymns. Marcus was very much enjoying sitting by Susanna after their week-long separation. He smiled at her and held her hand. She felt very safe when he was near. After the closing prayer, the saints found their way to their tents, and the herders made their way to where the cattle were to graze freely under their watchful eyes. They would need to stay awake until 1 o'clock, when their replacements would relieve them. Soon the sounds of the camp died down, and there was only an occasional lowing, mooing, or whinnying among the animals to accent the steady chirping of crickets. The calls of "all is well" from the camp guards every half hour gave everyone permission to relax and feel secure as they fell asleep after their exhausting day of trekking. And that's chapter 28. Over and out.